Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO. Today we're going to continue the series Emulation Night School, where I show you how to set up some of the best emulators around for both arcade and console. If you can't tell already, today we're going to be going back into Flycast to do the NAOMI, NAOMI 2, and NAOMI GD ROM tutorials. This is different than Dreamcast, even if it is very similar hardware, and the setup process is different, so I've separated these out into two videos. And again, if you need specialized help, you can pop over to my Patreon. I've got the Emulation Night School tier, where you can get direct access to me via chat, but honestly, if you pay attention to the tutorial, nobody should really need that. But the Sega NAOMI has so many amazingly fun games available for it, and we're going to be going over showing you how to play each and every one of them today. Some of this is going to be the same information from the Flycast Dreamcast tutorial, but a lot of it's going to be new, so don't skip around. So the first thing you're going to want to do is come over to the Flycast GitHub page, and this is going to have all of the different files that you're going to need to download so that you can get Flycast on your PC. And this is actually quite easy. It's not an installer, it's just a zip file that's going to bring you through the entire process, and I will go over that today, because whether it's Dreamcast or NAOMI, you definitely want to be using Flycast. It is amazing, and there's so many different platforms this runs on: Android, Linux, Mac OS, Xbox Series 1 and Series X, as well as of course Windows, which is what I'm going to be teaching you today. But for the most part, this information will be good for every single platform you could possibly want, because it's a lot of file-based structure systems. So go ahead and click on the builds page. This can look a little bit confusing. You're going to see a lot of different commits both on master and dev. We're going to be downloading the most recent master commit. You'll see here is the recording of the video. That was July 29th, 2024, and we're going to grab the Windows version of it, the x64 executable. Just go ahead and click download. That's all you need to do. From there, you go ahead and unzip it to wherever folder you want. Flycast does not install it unpacked, so you can run this from literally everywhere. I'm doing it from my downloads folder. You can put it on your desktop in an emulation folder. Honestly, wherever you want it to be is where you're going to pop it, so just remember that. So go ahead, when you first open up this folder, you're going to run Flycast just to get it running, because it's going to create a data folder on its first launch, and that's what we're going to want to be in, because we need to add the NAOMI BIOS files for both the NAOMI, the GD ROM, as well as the NAOMI 2, so we can run everything here. In the original tutorial for Dreamcast, we popped in the Dreamcast boot.bin file, so we're going to be putting the NAOMI files in the exact same spot. Because NAOMI does use a different BIOS, as well as NAOMI 2 and the GD ROM, and within NAOMI there's multiple BIOS files, so if you grab the right zip file, everything will come down for all three systems. But if you get an error on booting up any game that the BIOS is not there or it's not the correct one, it just means you grabbed the wrong files. So over here we're going to paste in naomi.zip. That's going to be all of the different BIOS variants for the base NAOMI. We're also going to put in NAOMI 2. That's going to be all of the BIOS variants for the NAOMI 2, which is an upgraded spec off the original console. We're also going to pop in naomigd.zip. These are going to be the accompanying files for the GD ROMs, because don't forget, NAOMI has both cartridges as well as discs, just like the Dreamcast used, except obviously the Dreamcast didn't use cartridges. But if you have naomi.zip, naomi2.zip, and naomigdrom.zip, you will have all of the different associated files you need to play every single Sega NAOMI game ever made, and that's really what's going on here, what we want to do. Because when it first shipped, the NAOMI was a cartridge system, and then it upgraded from there to have GD-ROM access. A lot of my collection is cartridge based, and the files do differ depending on if it's a cart or if it's a GD-ROM. We'll go over that as well. Something like Dead or Alive 2 Millennium here is going to be a cart game, so you only need the original naomi.zip BIOS for that. But the ROMs are going to look different as well, and you have to set folders up for games that use the GD ROMs and the CHD files, and we're going to go over that as well. But do pay attention to all of this, because the GD ROM format is different. We do need to deal with that, and it requires a specialized folder structure very similar to MAME. If you misspell one character, it's just not going to work. So what we're going to do here is pop in Virtua Fighter 4, and you're going to see I have vf4tune.zip and .chd.zip. The CHD is going to be the compressed version of the GD ROM that would have come from the arcades, and the zip file is going to be the ROMs to get it started up. So you need to have these two files for any game that runs off GD ROM. We'll go ahead and unzip that here, and you're going to see it's going to create a folder within data, and it's going to call itself vf4tuned-chd. You need to remove the -chd to the end of any folder that is a GD ROM. The folder should be named the exact same thing as the zip zip file that's going to launch the game. We have vf4tune.zip, and now we have vf4tune folder with all of the different CHD files for the game. If you do not rename the folder, it's not going to find the CHD file, it's not going to launch. This is exactly what MAME does for CHD games, and it does trip a lot of people up. So again, one more reminder, you have to do that folder renaming. Dead or Alive 2 is just a ROM cartridge. You'll pop it in data where all of the other games were when I showed you in the Dreamcast tutorial, and that will launch totally fine. So we'll come back over to Flycast, go into settings, and we'll basically repick our folder. I'm going to show you this from scratch versus rescanning it because maybe you didn't watch the first version, and do remember that Flycast goes alphabetically as well as capitalization. I have this in the downloads folder, so I have to scroll down until I get to lowercase letters because Flycast is not going to show up in the first listing, it's going to show up in the second. Grab that data folder, go ahead and rescan content and hit done. Now all of the games that you just added and are in that folder are going to appear on your launchables right here. I've got Dead or Alive 2 and Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tune. Those are the two games we're showing you for this instance, a NAOMI game on a cart and a NAOMI 2 game on a GD-ROM. Now I recommend using any sort of X input controller. It works perfectly on Windows, and you'll see here in the controls tab it's going to auto map itself, and you also have settings for rumble and things such as analog dead zones. You may want to adjust those, especially in something like Monkey Ball for NAOMI. I find that the dead zone is a little bit too small off the default, but go ahead and play around with these. But there is a secondary mapping screen when you're mapping arcade controls versus Dreamcast. So if you go into map here, you're going to have a listing of all of the different controls that Dreamcast uses. You do not map your arcade controls in this menu. You have to go up to the top and take this little top-down menu here, pop that little arrow, and you're going to see arcade controls. This is where you map everything for your arcade controller, and honestly the auto mapping here sometimes is perfect, sometimes is not correct, so you want to check into that. But the most important thing you need to do is you need to map a button for service and for test, because arcade games keep their options in the test menu, not like a console game where you have an actual options menu when you're playing the game. So go ahead and map test and map service to whatever buttons on the controller you want. Just make sure they're not anything that you use or get close to, because if you hit the test button when you're playing the game, it's going to exit the game and put you right into the test menu, and you're going to have to start from scratch again. You'll see here I use the home button just for convenience, so that's why Steam popped up. But you can pick anything you want as far as the bindings of these are concerned, and you can go through and rebind all of your controls if you want to change anything around. Once you're done with that, go ahead and double click on whatever game you want, and it's going to start up. Some of these games take a little bit longer because they have to decompress and de-encrypt the actual game in and of itself, and you will see sometimes it takes 10 seconds, sometimes it takes something like 30 seconds. But as we get in Dead or Alive 2 Millennium here, I am running this at a 3x scale. I could get higher than this, but it absolutely works perfectly fine. I hit that test button, and basically all of the NAOMI games are going to have this first test menu, but you want to go down to game test mode to get into the actual settings for that individual game. The first test menu usually is just stuff for the actual hardware. And then from here you can navigate around, change the difficulty, change the sound options. This is how you adjust options within Flycast and within NAOMI games. So again, I can't tell you enough, you want to bind a test button and a service button, because you're going to be using those to navigate around basically anything and change any of the settings for these arcade games. Now Dead or Alive 2 has a nicer looking test menu with a little bit of artwork on the back. Clearly they were going for a certain vibe, but for the most part the test menu is just going to be white text on a black screen, nothing too fancy. But you need to get used to doing this, because if you're not too into arcade emulation, you may not know about the test menu and you may not know how to navigate around it. So basically just rebind those buttons and make sure you know where they are. You're going to be using them on basically every single game. When you want to get back to the game in and of itself, you exit the test menu, and then on the system menu you're going to hit exit again, and that'll bring you right back to the game you were just playing. It'll boot itself back up, and that is how you change all of the settings on any of the arcade emulation, NAOMI or NAOMI 2 on Flycast. And again, Flycast does such an incredible job of emulating these games. If you get to NAOMI 2 and you find you're getting some slowdown, you might want to dial back the internal rendering resolution a little bit. I have an i9 with a very high test GPU, so I have all the ability in the world to really dial this thing up, but NAOMI 2 is way more powerful than the stock NAOMI, so if you get frame drops on NAOMI 2, it's probably time to dial back that resolution a little bit. Otherwise, emulation on both of these is absolutely incredible, and you don't have to own original hardware to play these NAOMI and NAOMI 2 exclusives. Obviously I do, but that's what I love to collect. But if you follow all the steps in this tutorial, you'll be emulating NAOMI and NAOMI 2 as well as the GD-ROM games perfectly fine. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and if you want to join the Patreon to get specialized help, the link below as well. Now definitely check this out, it's an awesome emulator that does a great job, but go play some NAOMI. See you guys next time. Bye bye.